Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo. Bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We're excited also to welcome our guest. She's coming to us from the United Kingdom, and her name is Tamsin Wood. Hey, before our guest comes in, we gave a sneak preview of the Solve It for Kids podcast here on Reading with Your Kids, and it was so popular, it's like spun off. It spun off into its own thing. And my buddy, our dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this great new podcast. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Jed. Oh, I am so excited about our new podcast. We've been getting some great reviews. Everybody wants to find out what's going on and meet and listen to some of our scientists and engineers. We have done how do you map an underwater forest?
Yeah.
We have done how do you cut a person in half safely? Of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have talked about improving your connection with water by going on a water walk, and we have watched Vanessa Brantley Newton create illustrations that come to life.
I took a water walk with my amazing niece. We had such a great time. I didn't fall into the water, but it was really, really fun. And I love the fact that all of our guests are giving our wonderful listeners challenges, really fun challenges that they can do together as a family. And that's so cool. Hey, tell everybody where they can find Solve It for Kids, because it's not on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's its own thing.
So please, if you want to keep listening, go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can download all 4 of the first episodes that we have, plus listen to all the new ones we have coming out. You can also find on Stitcher Radio and, of course, through our website, solveitforkids.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be part of this awesome, awesome, awesome podcast.
Well, we make a great STEM team, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, join us over at solveitforkids.com. Joining us right now from the United Kingdom, she is the author of many, many great children's books that we're going to be speaking about today. She's also known as the crazy little fairy lady on Instagram. Please welcome to the show, Tamsin Wood. Tamsin, how are you?
I am very well. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm so excited to have you here today, and I love the fact that you're known as crazy little fairy lady on Instagram. Tell us about that before we start talking about your books, please.
I am anything but ordinary. I don't believe in being boring at all. I've had pink and purple hair. I have been known to dress up in appallingly crazy outfits to embarrass my children, and just purely because I like to. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from.
I probably share that with you. I've never had, I did have orange hair once. And supposedly it was only supposed to be for an event and for a night, and it was supposed to wash right out in the morning, but it didn't, and I had a surprise job interview that I went to with orange hair. And this was many decades ago, so I didn't get the job, needless to say.
Did they not like the idea of orange hair?
They didn't seem to like the idea of my, and it was very neon, kind of bright orange, a color that you don't find in nature, or certainly not on human beings. But I think that we're kindred spirits in that I, too, am anything but ordinary. I guess that plays a lot into your children's literature and the books that you've written over the years.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I wanted to create something very, very unique. That in itself is embodied in the name. You're probably wondering where on Cangleford Nock came from. It's a bit of a mouthful. It's actually the anagram of the first place that I lived when I moved to England, because I used to live in the tiny island of Jersey, where New Jersey got its name from. And when I moved to the UK mainland, I lived in an area called Longford in Cannock, which is in the West Midlands. And I made an anagram of that because I wanted to create something that was absolutely new and different.
And it certainly is new and different. Now, tell me, this is just a kind of a sidetrack, but I'm fascinated when things come up. I've heard of the Isle of Jersey. Is that part of the United Kingdom?
Oh, now you're asking. We're getting into very deep territory here. Okay, it's part of the British Isles, but not part of the United Kingdom. It's governed all by itself. It has its own government, its own money, its own laws. It's completely separate to Britain itself, but it also comes under the guidance of the Queen, so it's part of the Commonwealth.
Oh, my goodness. Some things get needlessly complicated, I think, sometimes.
They absolutely do.
Well, I'm really interested in talking about your journey as a children's author. What was your first book, and what first inspired you to write for children?
I grew up reading Beatrix Potter, Enid Blyton, Nancy Drew mysteries, Arthur Ransom, Swallows and Amazons, and all those kinds of books, and the classics. And then my favorite subject at school was English. I was forever writing stories, and I kind of I just had that in me. It kind of flows through me, I guess, and I knew I always wanted to do that, at some point in my life. So I kind of got a little bit lost in between school and motherhood, trying to find my place in the world and what I wanted to do. And motherhood was really what brought me back to where I felt I really belonged. My kids love being told stories at bedtime. Sometimes they liked the books. Sometimes they'd say, "Nah, make something up." So I would just make stuff up, and they loved it. And you know, obviously your kids are always going to say, "That was a great story." But I came up with some ideas which I pitched to my kids, and they loved them. And I thought, why not write them down? Which is what happened.
I'm wondering, did you ever, I had a similar experience with my kids. We would love to read together, and they would always ask me to come up with something original and unique. And there's this one time that I told a story, and they loved it. And then they went off to bed. I forgot completely about it. They came up to me the next night, "Tell that story again." I'm like, "What story are you talking about?" "Well, the one with the," and I had no idea. It completely left my brain.
When I was a child, my parents told me about a flying tricycle. That was my story that my parents read to me.
A flying tricycle. That's so cool.
Well, I actually had a tricycle as a child. I didn't have a bicycle. I had a tricycle. And so that was kind of where that came from. When my son was very small, we had an ongoing story that we created of a talking dinosaur. And with my daughter, it's Fairies.
Fairies, that's something that is, the idea of fairies is something that's very popular in the United Kingdom. I know in Ireland, my grandparents talked a lot about fairies. Can you talk a little bit about, for folks who don't have roots in that part of the world, what the notion of fairies are? They're not always kind of delightful little Tinkerbell things, are they?
I don't know. I've never actually seen a real one, not yet. They are all over my garden. I hear them constantly, but I have yet to catch one. My beautiful grandmother, my mother's mother, she was a very keen gardener. She loved her flowers, and she also had this beautiful collection of books that were actually called The Flower Fairies. Beautiful drawings, beautiful little poems, and she showed these to me when I was very, very young. It's one of my first memories of my grandmother, and that was where my love of fairies came from. And it's a very quaint idea. but it's also based on an apparently true story from very, very long time ago in England of two little girls who allegedly found some fairies and took some photographs of them, which became world famous.
Wow.
So I think it's been a thing for many, many years that, people like to believe in fairies and that they actually exist.
Yes, it is. I have vague memories of my grandfather talking about fairies, and whether or not they existed physically in the world, they absolutely existed in the minds of so many different people. Tell us about the first book that you created.
The first book I created was called Fairy Boots, and I wrote it specifically for a little girl who was very, very sick. She'd been in the news and she was extremely poorly. Her father was also extremely poorly, and he wanted to do what he could to raise money for her to receive the treatment she needed, so that she would recover, in case he did not. And I wanted to help, and I wrote a book. I just was so inspired by their story. I wrote Fairy Boots, which is the story of a little girl who finds a pair of magic boots in her closet, and she puts them on and she's transported to a magic world at the bottom of the garden and meets a group of fairies who teach her that everything is going to be okay no matter what happens.
It sounds like, in going through your catalog of books, that there's a theme. You write these wonderful stories, but they have some depth. They have some meat to it. There's always seems to be a lesson that you're trying to share with kids and families. Why is it important for you to put these lessons into your books?
I think that reading is one of the most valuable tools that we can give to our children. With so much modern technology in the world, the simple act of sitting down with your child and reading a beautiful book, whether it's got pictures or whether you imagine those for yourself, is just something that cannot be replaced in any other way. And I think to be able to write books that teach things, to use them as teaching aids, to get children to explore their imaginations, to get them to explore different concepts rather than just having them laid out in a boring way that isn't going to interest them, is so, so important.
Now, in your book, Always With Me, you deal with some really heavy, to use a word, heavy topics like grief and loss. Was that challenging for you?
That book was written connected to the same family that I wrote my original book, Fairy Boots, about. It was after the little girl sadly lost her father. He died of a brain tumor. And I felt that loss very, very deeply, because supporting them through what they'd been through and rooting for them and wanting everything to work out so much, and then realizing that, life isn't always fair. Life doesn't always end up the way you want it to. And that is a reality. And I think that is something that I wanted to put across in this book. It's got beautiful pictures. It's got beautiful colors. It looks like just a beautiful book to read, but the message within it is trying to get through to children that things will happen that we cannot stop. We can't do anything about them. We cannot change them. And you need, in the best way possible, in the gentlest way possible, to help children to understand these things and to come to terms with them. And I felt that that was what this book was for.
It's interesting. I mentioned my family, my grandfather. I grew up in a time where we didn't talk about these things. We didn't. Well, you acknowledge when someone left, when you lost somebody, but kids weren't part of that grieving process. Kids weren't invited to the wakes or the funerals and things like that. And I'm really happy that you and other authors are creating books that help families to sit down and talk about these issues with young kids, because it's so very important.
The main thing to get across, Jed, is that these issues are important, and our children have minds like sponges. They understand more than we give them credit for sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it's so important that we embrace the tools that we have to share these concepts and these topics with the children around us, because in order to help them through difficult situations, we need to face them head on. We need to not try and cover them up and brush them to one side. We need to say, okay, you want to talk about this, you want to ask questions, let's give you the facts, let's give you as many answers as possible to equip you so that you have that knowledge and you have what you need to be able to deal with those situations.
Yeah, so very important. Now, you told me earlier on that Cangleford Nock is you created that that name based on your home island of Jersey. Tell us about the series itself, please.
Okay, the series is made up of 2 books. Each has 4 stories in it. And each story teaches a specific life lesson. It teaches sharing. It teaches being responsible. It teaches helping others. It teaches about love and friendship.
Cool. You seem to, from what I hear, that giving back is really important, and that you're very supportive of a number of different charities, especially through your work as an author. What does it mean? What does giving back mean to you, and why is it so important?
I feel that I was given the gift to be able to write for a purpose, and that purpose is not only to share what I can do, but also to be able to highlight different issues. And I think that as authors, we all have a wonderful platform to be able, through what we write in our books, to highlight the issues that we are portraying in our stories. And I feel that it is important to share the work of many of these wonderful groups who are trying so hard to help numerous different people, whether it be children or adults around the world, to deal with illness, poverty, mental health. And I feel that that is my way of saying thank you for the wonderful gift I've been given to write these books, the platform I've been given through various people to share my work, and I want to give that back in order to enable other people, other children, to be able to grow up and have that chance to do things for themselves when they grow.
You know, I think that message is very vital right now. You know, the world has been, hopefully is coming out of this self-imposed quarantine, where literally for the first time, almost the entire world was encouraged to stay inside and not get together with others. And I imagine that there's a lot of folks who aren't feeling that kind of magic that you just spoke about, and aren't feeling that they have a lot of gifts. Their kind of world has been turned upside down. Do you have any words of encouragement? Because you seem like such a positive person. Do you have any words of encouragement for those folks who may be struggling right now?
I think the thing that's been overwhelming for me during this entire time, this last few months, has been how we have seen firsthand that very ordinary looking people who we've perhaps not noticed before, are the true heroes. They are the unsung heroes in our society. People don't have to be rich. They don't have to have wonderful things, material things. They have gifts which have been immeasurable in helping to put our society back together, to keep it going. And I think that is something that children need to understand, is that it's what's inside of you that is important. And if you have the strength to get through something like this, if you have the tenacity to face challenges like being stuck at home, having to find new ways to do things, having to start fresh in a new direction because your parents may have lost their jobs and you're facing an uncertain future. I think just that whole concept of ordinary can be extraordinary, and that working together can solve problems, and believing in yourself, actually saying to yourself, I can do this, is what's important. It's not about money. It's not about power. It's about inner strength.
You're absolutely right. I'm thinking as you're speaking, ordinary can be extraordinary. And I'm just thinking of all the literally millions of parents all around the world who never thought of themselves as a teacher or an educator, even though we are always talking about the fact that parents are their first and most important teachers. They suddenly found themselves thrust into this position where they were their kids' teacher day to day, and they did a fantastic job. And so many people that we take for granted, the shopkeepers, the folks who keep groceries on the shelves, the folks who bring the foods that we need to eat to the grocery stores, those folks really came through and sustained us, helped us keep going. So I'm really happy that you reminded us that the ordinary can be very extraordinary. Tell us what's cooking. I know you have this very fertile mind, very rich imagination. I know that there must be a new project that you're working on.
There is more than one project, Jed. I am always busy. My mind never goes to sleep.
That can be annoying sometimes for you. Can you give us a sneak peek at anything that we might be seeing from you in the near future?
I most certainly can. I have a project coming up later this year called Rainbow Baby, which is going to be dedicated to all of those families who have suffered miscarriage but then gone on to have their very own rainbow baby and add to their family. I wanted to highlight how that baby that they may have lost is always still a part of their family and is never replaced, and is always very, very much at the forefront of their minds, and to highlight how it feels for them to go through that kind of situation and what a journey it is for them. The second project that I've got currently in production is the story of Phoebe Stropalot. Now, Phoebe is a very naughty little girl, and Phoebe is going to be starting school in the fall, and she's really going to give people a run for their money.
I'm with that name, I'm sure she is. And I'm really happy that you're tackling the issue of rainbow babies. I think that's a very important subject, and I think I'm really anxious and looking forward to seeing how you address that, because so much of society tells parents not to really address it. It's like, oh, well, that's it, kind of better off, there must have been something wrong, so it's probably better off that the pregnancy ended. And I know folks, when people say that, they mean they mean well and they think that they're helping, but I don't think that kind of message helps very much.
I think it's something that people need to realize, that everybody is entitled to their own feelings, whether it be through loss, whether it be through struggling with anxiety and depression, whether it be even celebrating joy. Everybody is entitled to feel the way that they feel, and nobody can take that away from them, and nobody can tell them that there's a right or a wrong way to feel. And it's very, very important that we embrace that everyone's journey is different, and that everyone is going to go through maybe the same situation, but in a very different way. And I think it's important that we highlight that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that we let folks know where they can find out more about you, more about your entire library of wonderful children's books, and to connect with you on social media.
Okay, my website is www.canglefordnock.co.uk, and you can also find me on Facebook. the Fairies on Cangleford Nock page, official. And I'm also on Instagram, as you said earlier, as Crazy Little Fairy Lady.
Well, I am certainly going to be finding you on Finding Crazy Little Fairy Lady on Instagram, and also making sure that I get over and subscribe at your website so I can be the first to know when new works are coming from you. We've had a great time speaking to our friend from the United Kingdom, Tamsin Wood. Tamsin, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Dr. Terrence Shipman. You may remember Dr. Terrence has been on the show many times celebrating his wonderful Mr. Shipman's Kindergarten Chronicles series. He was last on to celebrate the Field Day. He is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read author. And he's also a lifelong educator, and he's joining us to share with us some thoughts about how we can work together, how we can help our kids work together to build a more just and equitable world. That's the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Tamsin Wood. Also want to thank my incredible team, starting with my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. My awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank you for taking the time to check out our new podcast, Solve It for Kids. But most of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.